welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. As always, I really appreciate you being here with me today. And I cannot wait to get into this topic with you. It sounds sort of funny to say that it's one of my favorite things to talk about in the grief space, but honestly, it is. And more importantly, it's a really important topic to cover as well, because it's one of the things that happens as we're in the process of perhaps losing someone or something, when we're maybe going through some anticipatory grief or have already lost them and are now sitting here and trying to grapple with that. So today we are talking all about grief triggers. So your gain from today and this episode will be to join me in talking about some both common and more uncommon triggers, and acknowledge and understand your triggers so they affect your day-to-day life as little as possible. And with a little understanding and a little bit of work on these, I have no doubt you will be on your way to being a happier and mentally healthier human being. So let's start off with the basics here. What are triggers anyway, right? The answer is pretty simple. Anything that brings up memories of a loss that has happened to you. And these have the power to bring up emotions, a lot of emotions here, right? Despair, sadness, loneliness, longing, those classic what if or if only statements, and so much more. And also with triggers, they can definitely pop up without warning a lot of the time, particularly in social settings where they might shake you a little with their intensity, or did it just come on really quickly and you're kind of scrambling like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this. But on the other hand, triggers can also sometimes elicit really positive, joyful memories as well. It might not all be doom and gloom here. The tricky part about triggers is even years after the loss, they can happen. Whether it be a trigger that you're familiar with, that you've experienced multiple times, or one that's new and maybe you haven't encountered yet, you may come across a situation where you or those around you maybe don't know what to say or exactly what to do, especially if the trigger is noticeable or makes you more emotional in some capacity. Or people will sometimes simply assume that you're no longer affected by your loss, especially if you seem to be doing really well and you're by and large very happy, or at least outwardly, right? And they might be surprised that a trigger is happening. But rest assured, this can happen to anyone at any time. So you are not alone in this crazy whirlwind thing known as grieving. Now, before we get too far into this, I'll begin by saying one important thing here. If it's comforting to you to share your trigger and the memories and the feelings that accompany it with someone, I encourage you to do that, because they might not even understand how helpful they are being by simply being there to comfort you. And conversely, I cannot recommend enough how critical it is to find the right person or people to lean on. And if they can relate to your loss or such triggers that you're experiencing too, even better. It can only have a positive effect on your coping. So let's dig into some examples of grief triggers. This can really be anything under the sun, anything that resonates with you that is a reminder of what you've lost. So these can be in the form of a larger event like an anniversary, a birthday, or a favorite holiday. And with these specifically, triggers like this can be some of the most difficult because you might recall positive, cheerful things you did together and miss those really intensely, or some really sad aspects of those days, of course, goes without saying, right? And this can create a really big influx of contrasting emotions. And since they typically happen once a year, these anniversaries, these birthdays, these holidays, it will sometimes feel like they will never stop. Another very common, seemingly obvious one could be the anniversary of a death specifically. And this can be very traumatizing. This could be a very agonizing event to have to relive each and every year. But there are other triggers that can affect you that you might not even expect. So, for example, one that has actually really gotten me a couple of times was seeing a doppelganger of my mom or my dad or even my dog. Let's be real. In fact, I think it's actually happened with my dog more times than it has with my parents. And in fact, I had a moment or two that I'll just share with you really quickly where I could have sworn, my heart skipped a beat for a moment thinking this was my dog. One afternoon, I saw a twin of my sweet dog that passed. She was a little Bichon Frise. And I'm telling you, I couldn't get a grip for probably several minutes afterwards. My husband was with me, and I just kept saying to him, like, babe, that was her. Like, that was insane. And that is like, that can really bring up a lot of stuff here. And so for me, seeing someone or my dog, that resembled my loved one has actually really triggered me. And it got to a point where it triggered dreams, actually, that really stuck with me for a little while afterwards. So a lot of these triggers, they can really snowball into a lot of aspects of our lives that we might not anticipate. Other more minor yet painfully taxing triggers could be a song, either one that they loved or maybe you loved together, a TV show or a movie, a book, certain foods or dishes. And actually a change in season can also ignite new, different smells or feelings in the air, which is often a really notable trigger for many people out there. But a change in season isn't, a trigger that we might think of every day. And with the change in season, this can even cause a mood shift for even like a longer period of time until you kind of come to terms with it. So winter is sometimes one of these for me, especially given my mom passed in December, the holidays right afterwards. That's never easy. And more triggers could be a favorite city or, a place, and all that encompasses from a favorite coffee shop or a restaurant to a school hiking path or a car that looks like one that they once had. Seriously, the list is endless, and it is as unique as the loss that you are experiencing. And personal items too, like their clothes or perfume or cologne, pictures of them either more recently or even in their childhood, or, a plethora of other really cherished treasures. One particularly really surreal trigger for me was when I was first going through some of my mom's things after she died. I found her hairbrush and her curlers with her really beautiful, smooth, blonde hair still intact in both of these things. Oh my God, did I cry when I found those? And having things that they touched around you is one thing, but having a physical piece of them still around, like their hair, right? That was quite another thing. And that really cut me so much deeper than I ever could have anticipated. Now, the rather annoying thing that I've found about triggers is sometimes you don't know what one of your triggers is until it triggers you. It's a revolutionary idea, I know. But this can take time, and this can be really exhausting and even a little frustrating because you feel like you can hardly do a thing without being triggered by something. It definitely takes some patience and some understanding. And whether it was the loss of a person, a job, a home, what have you, sometimes you'll have a good gauge on what can or will trigger you before if you've come across it. For example, perhaps you've just lost your home or you've moved away from somewhere that you loved and you're struggling with this adjustment. Passing by that house could be very emotional, and it would seem fairly obvious that you might want to steer clear from that. But if you maybe lost someone to an illness, as I did, hearing about someone going through the same thing or certain aspects of it could be particularly painful. But some triggers are not so obvious, or they are nice and subtle, like that of a massive truck hitting you. So, in other words, they knock you on your ass. And the goal here is really pretty simple. We want to identify them. You gotta know what it is if you're gonna face it head on, right? Now, more on that is coming up soon, but I really want to also talk about not fearing your triggers, because this is a truly very important part of the process. Why? Because triggers have the power to haunt you and get the best of you if you allow them to. For a long time, anyone that so much breathed the word cancer would bring up so many punishing emotions for me and, everything that my parents and my family unit went through. But guess what? We can't control other people, and neither could I in that situation. And my parents are, sadly, not the only people on this planet to have been affected by cancer. It's something that I had to get accustomed to hearing about. And you'll likely experience something to this effect at some point in your journey if you haven't already. And if you do, the key I've found is to not shy away from them. And yes, this can be painful. It is hard confronting these things head on. And it absolutely takes getting on that roller coaster and going up and up and up. This metaphorical roller coaster, as high as you think you can go on that incline of emotions, the countless emotions that we feel, to the point where you are so close to reaching the top and moving past it. And you will get there, I promise you. You will come down that decline fast and furious to feel the wind in your hair, and you will feel so stinking good. But there can be a lot of pain that can come before that. And my recommendation here is to not push yourself too hard. Know your limits, but slowly allow yourself to face them and feel all the things that we feel with grief. Because without allowing these raw emotions to come in, it will get you every damn time, and you are giving it the power. And what I always like to say is, you've already lost enough. Let's not give in to something that we have this really incredible power to control in a lot of ways, right? So we can't always control our triggers, and some of these things are going to come up and they're going to hit us out of nowhere, right? There's only so much of that we can control. But what is so beautiful and what is within our control is how we handle them and how we approach it one by one, moment by moment. So one last thing here. I also just would be remiss if I didn't say this. People can be forgetful or straight up inconsiderate without meaning to. It happens. Maybe sometimes they do mean it, which is really just very cruel. But most of the time, I would venture to say they might say something, they might trigger you, and they really didn't mean anything negative or ill-intended by it. So stay tuned for a really helpful tip for that in just a moment. Keeping the right mindset and a level head in these moments, it does take a little work, but I assure you it is well worth it, and we'll get into that soon. Okay, so I feel like this feels like a good moment to get into how to overcome these very unpleasant, triggering moments. So let's get into it. Overcoming, or really what I should say is ultimately coping with your triggers, doesn't have to be as hard as you think. Some things might always trigger us. So let's start here by getting this idea of sort of overcoming and squashing every single one out of our heads, right? I know I kind of started this off by saying let's overcome our triggers, but some of them, there's not an overcoming that sort of happens. It's just a matter of living with them and embracing them and knowing how to control them when they happen. So let's just start with getting a handle on them. Because some triggers, let's keep in mind, they're going to go away or they will fade away naturally. And truthfully, it takes time. It just does. For example, when I moved into my parents' condo, completely surrounded by all of their things, it was trigger central. And after some time and settling in, it has never felt more like home. And I embrace the things that once plagued me. I mean, I have my dad's art on the walls. I have his sketches. I have all of the fun pieces that my mom picked out because she was kind of an interior decorator, literally at one point in her career, but also just at heart. She really chose everything in this condo so thoughtfully. And number one, I didn't want to get rid of anything, but at the same time, they were plaguing me. And that honestly took months to kind of come to terms with and get out of a little bit. And really what it came down to was reassociating my mindset with a lot of these things. Now, that being said, here are a few tips to acknowledge and, again, sort of, I use this term loosely, but overcome a trigger that you might be feeling. So tip number one, journal or write your triggers down. If you are maybe not readily near a paper and pen or like a more formal journal when one happens, type it out on your notes app or, something on your phone or some app of the like so you can add it in later. And the reason I love doing this is because it can help you eventually learn about them, maybe how frequently they're affecting you, and ultimately find a solution to gain a little control over your grief journey. And it's sometimes really helpful seeing them there, staring back at you on the page. And in a way, it can even feel a little less intimidating that way, instead of just these triggers making themselves comfortable in your head. Tip number two is to reframe your internal dialogue. Really just be kind to yourself. That's really it here. Outside of coping with a trigger, the what ifs and the if only statements can be really detrimental and hinder your progress. Now, I'm not saying you need to feel guilty if any of these come up. I mean, this is such a normal and natural part of the grief process. And there's so much more to come on this topic on this podcast. But what I will say to you now is that negative self-talk and this wallowing and this circle of negative thoughts that we sometimes go through in our head can be harmful because it involves internalizing guilt, shame, and a lot of other emotions that can come with those if only or what if statements. And they are ultimately something that you often can't control at all, and certainly not in the moment, but they only add to giving your trigger the power to affect you negatively. And I'll say it before, I say it again. You've been through enough. Don't punish yourself unnecessarily. Rather, establish positive self-talk that involves gratitude and hope, especially during bouts of triggers at the beginning stages of your grief. And this is when this can be the most difficult because we are in such a state of shock and we are in such a state of mourning and our brain is trying to get used to everything that's going on. So I just want to acknowledge if that's where you are right now, pulling yourself out of that to be able to really sit and dissect our triggers, that is easier said than done. But as always, we're just planting seeds here, right? Now, if it's really affecting your day-to-day to the point where you find yourself in a really unhealthy headspace, like more than usual, I want to say here, please consult your doctor or a medical professional or your therapist about ways to help you further. Because as much as I want to help you as a grief coach and here on this podcast, if you do find yourself in a really dark place more than usual, that's a sign that more help might be needed. And there is no shame in that. Right? Okay, this is survival. This is surviving our grief. Tip number 3 is to be prepared. By understanding where your triggers stem from, there is a better chance of managing your grief in the moment. Now, occasionally, it may be in the form of something that you can control, as I've said. For example, someone saying something insensitive or just making an ignorant comment that doesn't sit well. This has happened to me so many times. But the thing is, the more you nail that positive self-talk in advance and know that these things could come, the better you'll be able to let the moment slide a little easier. Now, just a quick note about being able to let comments slide. I know that is easier said than done. There are some things that people will say that are just so out of left field or so insensitive. Trust me, I've seen quite a few. And I just want to remind you of two things here. Number one, so many of the judgments or comments or beliefs or whatever it is that people have are a direct reflection on what they have experienced in their own lives. The losses they have or haven't seen, the way that they were raised, the way that they were shown to express their grief or not, right? So we have to remember we're all unique. We've all had beautiful, unique experiences, and we have to embrace that, as frustrating as it can be sometimes. And then the other thing here, another aspect of this, is that what I've come to find is that so much of what people say or might express, whether or not there's any ill intent behind it, is a reflection on them more than it is on us. And as humans, as sometimes egotistical beings, I do this all the time still too, is we take things personally, we internalize things, we make things about us. And we have to remember that sometimes it's not about us at the end of the day. So that being said, one thing I just wanted to mention here is, as an example, I can't tell you how many times I would get in the car after my mom died and heard an Aerosmith song, and this still happens. My mom may as well kissed the ground that Steven Tyler walked on. She absolutely loves the band, and we would sometimes rock out together in the car driving somewhere. And now it is something I see as a little sign that she is with me. But initially, it made me so sad. Like, I couldn't see past her not being there with me to share in that moment. And it made me miss her being there in person. Like, being around me in the spiritual realm just wasn't enough. But the more work that I've done on myself, the more that I've come to accept that my mom is around still and seeing every single thing I do. I think she's actually really up in my business, if I'm being honest. And she's experiencing those moments with me just in another way. In fact, I've come to have a little bit of fun with it. I look forward to hearing those songs. I'll even crank up the song. I love cranking up Dream On and just singing to it by myself. And I'll actually play these songs on purpose as a way to bring her memory closer to me and to have a little spiritual bonding moment. And the reason I bring this story up, just again as an example, is because there are sometimes these triggers that we'll have that we think that there is no way in hell that we're ever going to be able to reassociate these things into something positive, or they're always going to make us sad, or they're always going to bring tears to our eyes, or however it's affecting you. And I just want to give you a little bit of hope today that it does take a little bit of work. It does take a little bit of almost convincing ourselves of something that we might not fully believe in yet. But it's one of those things that almost works like mantras. If you say it enough times, if you believe it enough times, that does sometimes begin to become your reality. So with that being said, tip number 4, find a distraction. Yes, sometimes I have found that a distraction can be a good thing, but I am talking about a healthy distraction here. Now, while some of your triggers might cause you to go into a state of mourning all over again, listen, totally fair. Surrounding yourself during the moment or shortly thereafter with people or a place or something that you love will and can really help ease your mind and emotional state when you are experiencing one. So if you've had a rough moment, go grab that coffee drink that you love that sparks joy. Have a day with the girls or with the boys. Cuddle with your pet. Paint, do some artwork, go for a run. I mean, whatever helps you work through it. And by the way, I just want to mention, I mentioned, a place there, maybe going to a place. Let's say you can't physically go to the place that brings you a lot of comfort. I'll be really honest with you. The East Coast for me, because I was born there, I grew up there, I had really beautiful childhood memories there. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, certain parts of that brings a lot of comfort to me, but here I am in California. I can't exactly go there quickly, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of like maybe dropping into like a 5 or 10 minute meditation and envisioning yourself there. And that can really bring you down in some of these moments. Or maybe it's not even like a meditation. Maybe it's something you might have to do a little quicker because you're having a sort of in the moment trigger, a little bit of panic, and there's so much beauty and benefit in being able to visualize places that bring a lot of comfort to you. Italy is another big one for me. So again, just to use an example, but really point of the story here is to associate a positive feeling with it, with the trigger, and tap into finding some joy within it. Because that way, if you run into that trigger again, it might not leave you feeling with such a negative connotation attached, right? You're doing the work to kind of like turn it on its head a little bit. And all of this will show you that there can be happiness and hope, even in those tough moments. So whatever your distraction is, just make sure, again, it is a healthy coping mechanism. So now I want to begin finishing this episode up with talking about releasing your triggers. As I mentioned earlier, there will come a point where some triggers of your loss will go away naturally, or quite frankly, they will just happen enough times that you are less and less fazed by it. That has definitely been the case with a lot of my triggers. Plus, time heals almost all wounds. And I acknowledge how cliche that sounds, but there is so much truth to it if you haven't started noticing that already. But again, remember, time itself is not the only healer of grief. And we may never be fully healed. And that's okay. And remember, there's a whole episode on healing and what healing is really. So definitely go check that out if you haven't already. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. But we can certainly make some things easier on ourselves with a little bit of grief work, with a little bit of a mindset shift, right? Some triggers, however, you might have to work a little harder to get accustomed to them or to try and kick them altogether. Perhaps you will rarely pass that recognizable building, whatever that is for you, or smell that cologne, or see that baseball team logo, or like taste a candy cane. I mean, truly anything that you associate with the loss without a tinge of hurt. And, I personally have so many. I always pass the post-acute building, which is basically the hospice building that my dad passed away in. On my way to the grocery store. I mean, multiple times a week, I am passing this building. And every single time, it makes my heart wince a little bit. It does. And it takes me back to visiting him and having to go there at like 3:30 in the morning to say goodbye to him. But guess what? It has eased up over the last year or so. Mostly because I have passed it so many times. But that's also time, and that's also a lot of reframing my mindset at work. Another example is I can never see a rainbow without thinking about the call that I got from the hospital when my mom was in the final hours of her life. I was literally pulled over on the side of the road taking a picture of one at the time, and I got a call from the hospital, and they were like, hey, mom's not doing so well. Her blood pressure is dropping a little bit. You might actually want to turn around. I just left the hospital trying to go home to like take care of some things. And they were like, hey, just so you know. And I associated rainbows with that negative, very negative call for a long time. Now I might see rainbows here and there, but I've reframed it to be in a way that it makes me feel like she's with me. And instead she's telling me, hey, what's up? I'm still here and I'm watching you. It adds to my day and it adds to my life. It doesn't remind me as much about what was taken from me or the horror of that night. I mean, it still does a little. I will be completely honest with you here. This is a safe space. This isn't a perfect science. And, we experience a lot of emotions. We can't just ignore some of these things that have happened to us, nor should we. But the point is, we're here, we're human, and we're trying. It's the trying, right? It's those baby steps. Now, my list of triggers could go on for half a mile, and this isn't about me, but you get the gist. By using the tools that I've talked about here, sooner or later, triggers will become more manageable when and if they do come, or they'll be less frequent, really. Your trigger has the ability to become a mechanism of comfort, just like I talked about in that rainbow example. And when in doubt, when you are at your lowest, I want for you to ask yourself, what about this is triggering me? Get curious about your grief. Get curious about your triggers. And also ask yourself, how can I reframe my mindset so this is something I can grow and learn from? How can I reassociate this with something more positive? If not today, with a little time. Because again, remember, the examples I gave, those did not happen overnight, not even close. But I allowed myself to have an open heart and an open mind and to allow that mindset shift to come. And I want to remind you, give yourself grace. It has the potential to change the way that you look at your life, and that is pretty special. Because remember, triggers are a super important and necessary thing to feel in order to grieve and to grow from our losses, to find those gains. And this is where the change and these crazy, awesome aha moments can happen, which also are, as exciting as they are not always comfortable. And if you are struggling with this is my challenge to you today. Take one of your deepest, most painful triggers, confront it head on by acknowledging how it's making you feel, identify those emotions, breathe, take in those really deep breaths in and out, and begin letting it go. And do that over and over again. Seriously, that is how I got over some of my most debilitating triggers, that breath work. And soon enough, those triggers will feel less and less frequent, less rigid, and a little less overwhelming. All right, with all of that, thank you so much for hanging out with me and being open-minded about confronting and working through your triggers. I really do hope this episode helped and encouraged and inspired you to reframe the way that you think about your triggers with some time and how you allow them into your life or not, right? We are completely in control here. If you liked today's episode or found value in it, I would love to hear from you. As always, you're welcome to DM me, email me. My inboxes are always open to you. And if you are enjoying this podcast, I would appreciate it so much if you left a review, if you feel called to do so. That way, other people just like you can discover this content as well. I hope you have a fantastic day, my friend, and I will see you in the next episode.